Allison, I wanted to walk you through the data that my spring 2019 class collected, looking at the distribution of mosses on the trees on the COS campus. So you guys read about the methods that were used. So the students were out working in pairs. They had a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter grid for determining the percent cover of mosses about a half meter above the ground on trees. And they measured the percent cover on both the north and the south side of the trees. They also measured the diameter at breast height of the trees using a DBH tape, and they noted the species of the trees. So if you take a look over here, these are the raw data. So in this column, we have the species. In this column, we have the percent cover of moss at a half meter above the ground on the north side. In this column, we have the percent cover of moss about a half meter above the ground on the south side. And then in this column, it's the diameter of the tree at breast height in centimeters. So you can scroll down and you can see that the class sampled 99 trees total. And then here on the ground, I've calculated the average percent cover. So this would be for the north side, so 17.6%. And then this would be for the south side, 7.82%. The columns G through K are the same. The only difference is that I've sorted the data by species. So you can see the incense cedars are up top, then the western junipers, and then finally the California black oak, and then the ponderosa pines. So we sorted them so that we could figure out, so that we could kind of look at the distribution of moss by species. And when you look at the data that we collected for incense cedar, we didn't find any moss growing on the north or the south side of any incense cedars. For the western juniper, it was the same story, no moss growing on any of them. The moss was primarily growing on the California black oaks, which you can see here. When we omit all of the zeros from the other species, we see that there was about 40% cover on the north side of the oaks and about 17% cover on the south side of the oaks. There was a little bit on the pines, but not much. So that's why in this third column, I only looked at the California black oak, because that was primarily where we found moss growing. So we'll get there in a minute. But before we do, I also wanted to show you the results of this t-test. This test compared the cover of moss on the north versus the south side of all of the trees we sampled. What we have here is a p-value that's less than 0.05, which is that critical value indicating that there is a significant difference between cover on the north versus the south side of these trees. And this was when we looked at all of the trees, so even including all of the zeros in the data set. Over here, this is a t-test looking at the difference between mean coverage on the north versus the south side of just the oaks. Remember, that was about 40% versus 17% on the south side. And we can see here that the p-value is way, way lower once we get rid of all these zeros, but still less than the critical value of 0.05, indicating there's a significant difference in moss coverage on the north versus the south side of the trees. Okay, finally, the other analysis that we did was to make a scatter plot of the percent cover of moss by the diameter of the tree, and this is just for the oaks. So this is what that relationship looks like. And this is the R squared. So what we see here is as diameter increases, so does the percent cover of moss. Um, the R squared here is zero point 0.3 or 0.35 approximately. So that indicates that the diameter at breast height of the tree accounts for about 35% of the variation in the percentage of moss cover. Obviously, the aspect is important too, but this graph seems to indicate that so is the diameter of the tree. So you've got a lot of information here about the distribution of moss by species, also the distribution of moss by aspect, and the distribution of moss based on the diameter of the oak trees out there. So hopefully you can study these numbers a little bit more, finish answering the questions on the lab sheet, and then prepare your lab report on this particular study. Okay, let me know if you have any questions.